A very good evening to you. And here we are again, once again, a Friday evening, 9 o'clock. It means it's time for that best of music's Sweet and Swing. And what have we got for you this evening? A bit of the Shearing Piano, more of Frank and Friends, Flanders and Swan, some Coleman Hawkins. And to get us going, let's chase the odd rainbow. Well, there could have been a few rainbows to chase of late. It's been a bit showery, hasn't it, to say the least. Question is, have we had the summer? I was debating this with the Memsard the other day, being accused of being a grumpy old man as usual. I can't actually deny it if I'm fair. I'm pretty much a grumpy old man and getting grumpier as I get older. Suffice to say that my theory is we've had the Manx summer now. We did have, I admit, a glorious period from May sometime, mid-May was it, a little earlier, through TT practices and TT racing until a week or so afterwards, almost, not quite, but almost wall-to-wall sunshine and certainly lovely summery temperatures. You actually felt like it was the summer. And then normal service was resumed. Suffice to say, yesterday evening before I came into the studio, it was 12 degrees in Cronkervoddy of a summer's evening. You see, that doesn't shout summer to me, that shouts late autumn. You're not going to sit out with a chilled Pimm's in 12 degrees of heat, are you? She points out there are still more of July and all of August. I reckon it's going to be more of the same. Anyway, so the argument went on. There have been a few rainbows of late. Someone was saying there's a gorgeous one only the other day when they were coming into work, although I haven't seen one myself of late. But there have been showers and sunshine, so it is rainbowy weather. So if you want to chase them, don't let me stop you. How are we all? I trust you are keeping well in any case, and we'll do our best to keep you cheery with a nice mix of music this evening more. As I say, from Flanders and Swan, I'm digging into that Frank and Friends as well again. Not Frankenstein, Frank and Friends. Frank Sinatra, that is. We heard a little bit last week with him singing with Bing. Wonderful. So I thought we'd hear a bit more. I rather enjoyed that. And we started off there with Chasing Rainbows, of course. The Skyrockets with Doreen Lundy taking the vocals. Not one of the better-known singers, really, Doreen, I don't think. However, yes, as far as singing with the Skyrockets is concerned, well, it did her no harm at all, really. Paul Feneley agreed to her joining the Skyrockets whilst the war was on somewhere in the middle of the war, I think the early 40s. But they got married. Yes, a true romance. They were married after the war in 1949, and she went on to sing with Geraldo. She sang with Max Jaffa and Eddie Calvert as well. Speaking of, yes, singing, I was thinking of dancing. And I was thinking of dancing, I think of Mantovani.
That love was only a will-o'-the-wisp. I'd look for it to find it only a will-o'-the-wisp. A thing of rapture others capture whenever they please. Yet it's so remote that it seems to float away on the breeze. Then you came at last and I was holding a will-o'-the-wisp. Whoever heard of arms enfolding a will-o'-the-wisp? Now here we are so close together, and when you tell me it's forever, I know that love is real and never a will-o'-the-wisp.
Mantovani and the orchestra, Alan Kane taking the vocals there. Mantovani, well, he came from a very musical family. His full name was the wonderful Annunzio Paolo Mantovani, and it was born in Venice. Yeah, what a beautiful musical city that is. His father revelled in the name of Benedetto Paolo Bismarck Mantovani, and he was a violinist and also the concertmaster of La Scala the Opera House Orchestra in Milan. Yeah, pretty high-flying stuff, under the baton of Arturo Toscanini, who I expect you might have heard of. The whole lot, they moved kit and caboodle over to England in 1912, where Mantovani Jr., Annunzio, studied at Trinity College of Music, and then after graduating, he formed his own orchestra, which he played around Birmingham, and married in 1934. By the time war broke out, his orchestra was one of the most popular British dance bands going, and gave regular BBC radio performances and live performances and such like, and also much in demand for doing musicals or whatever. So he did work with Noel Coward's in Pacific and Vivian Ellis's music setting of And So to Bed. And then after the war, in the 1940s or later 1940s, he concentrated more on recording and eventually stopped doing live performances altogether, and went on to work with Ronald Binge, famous for the Watermill, is it that lovely tune, who developed that sort of cascading strings effect, which eventually just became known as the Mantovani sound. That lovely rippling strings going on. And his records used to be used quite a bit back in the day when there were gramophones. A gramophone, Grandad. Well, vinyl back in popularity at the moment, isn't it? But if you went back in the day into a good hi-fi store, they might put on a bit of Mantovani and his rippling strings to show you how good the stereo equipment was. And he was the first person to sell 1 million stereophonic records. Not bad, eh? Not bad, recording for Decca and London Records. Quite a good record himself, that, isn't it? Very popular and still enjoyable music, isn't it? I always think of just sort of waltzing around the room listening to a bit of Mantovani. From Mantovani, we'll go a little bit more less upmarket, shall we say? Is that fair? Oh, I don't know. It Had to Be You, Harry Roy and the band. Dancing at the Palais, Harry Roy and his band. It had to be you. It does have to be you. It's got to be you, the audience. Without you, I am nothing. And, well, I'm just sitting here, like I said, like an old geezer playing records to himself, which I can do at home, quite frankly, so there's no point in, coming into the studio. But it's nice to know you're all out there. And as we always say, any thoughts, drop us a line. Howard Kane at manxradio.com, Caine. If you would like to use the quick email version, which I imagine most people do these days, even Silver Surfers, or non-Silver Surfers, or, of course, put pen to paper. People still do, If you can remember, I find I forget how to write sometimes these days. You get so used to not writing, just using your phone or your tablet or your laptop or whatever it might be, steam-powered computer, typing one way or another. And I sometimes find my handwriting is sort of gradually getting worse. Could just be age, of course. However, should you like to put pen to paper, it's Howard Kane at Sweet and Swing, Manx Radio, Broadcasting House, Douglas Head, Douglas, in the Isle of Man, and it's IM15BW. Any thoughts, any ideas, anyone you'd like to hear, anyone who'd like to be featured, any memories, anything. Get your name out there, something to read out nicely and talk about perhaps, and a bit more music, maybe something you've never heard and you'd like to hear more of. There must be loads of music out there we've never ever featured on Sweet and Swing, and it might be one of your favourites, so get it out there. If we can find it, we'll play it. Absolutely. And who knows, might even be on vinyl. I keep talking about that. I'll do it one day. Hopefully, before I snuff it. Right, I'll move on. I promised you some George Shearing. Solo Shearing, not with his quintet or with a larger orchestra or the famous quintet, of course. This is George Shearing solo piano, Stella by Starlight. Wonderful stuff. You'd hardly recognise it as George Shearing, would you? At least I wouldn't. Maybe you would. But I don't know, it just doesn't sound his sort of style. It sounds almost classical in styling. He's one of the most renowned pianists, I guess, in popular music. And yeah, when he left England to settle in the United States in 1948, he had to remodel his approach in many ways to the piano. All the famous pianists who'd inspired him, Teddy Wilsons and Art Tatum's, were alive and well and didn't need imitating. So within a year or so of arriving in the States, his bebop-influenced playing and the individual group sound of his quintet brought him a large fan base and a massive reputation. But he wasn't, not the one to sit on his laurels and let things rest there. And after working for a few years, 5 years, for MGM Records, he switched to the bigger Capitol label and began diversifying somewhat. So the mid-50s coincided with the great boom in the 12-inch LP, the Microgroove LP, tracks that hung together musically and he could program a set together. And his first quintet sets planned whole albums, the Shearing Spell and Latin Escapade and such like. But he kept sort of with the solo piano as well. And, well, we heard an example of it there, really. And a fine player he was. And you could imagine him being a classical, you could imagine him going into the classical world had he not decided to go into light music and go into the sort of jazz sound. He had that touch and more than a hint of classical styling there, I think, with that one. I certainly wouldn't have recognised it as George Shearing if I'd heard that without actually seeing the label, as it were. I'm most familiar with that wonderful Shearing sound, the quintet sound with the vibes and electric guitar and some wonderful brushwork from the likes of Denzel Best or whatever. It is Sweet and Swing, H with you until the top of the hour. I think it might be time for a bit of jazz in the classics. How about this one? Full Moon and Empty Arms.
Full moon and empty arms. The moon is there for us to share, but where are you? A night like this could weave a memory, and every kiss could start a dream for two. Full moon and empty arms. Tonight I'll use the magic moon to wish upon, and the next full moon, if my one wish comes true, my empty arms will be filled with full moon and empty arms. Tonight I'll use the magic moon to wish upon, and the next full moon, if my one wish comes true, my empty arms
This would be highlight time and light-up time. And tonight, the preview spotlights are sweeping the sky as we give you an inside listen to the voice of the new star of the new company of South Pacific, Miss Janet Blair, in one of the great songs from that great show.
That's quite a send-off, Mr. Sinatra.
You're quite a gal, Miss Blair. You ready? I shall sing the part marked he, and you sing the part marked she. We'd get a little mixed up if we didn't, wouldn't we? Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. You may see a stranger across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then, that somewhere you'll see her again and again.
Some enchanted evening, someone may be laughing. You may hear her laughing across a crowded room. And night after night, as strange as it seems,
the sound of her laughter will sing in your dreams.
Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fools give you reasons, wise men never try.
Some enchanted evening, when you find your true love, when you feel her call you across a crowded room,
then fly to her side and make her your own.
All through your life you may dream all alone.
Once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her,
never let her go.
Oh, wonderful stuff. 2 francs for the price of 1. How about that? A bit of a Frankie twofer there. So first off, we had our Jazz in the Classics for this week. Full Moon and Empty Arms. Beautiful stuff with Frank Sinatra, of course. And it was Sergei Rachmaninoff, the romantic theme of his second piano concerto in C minor from 1901. That's what it was based on. That lovely Full Moon and Empty Arms with Frank in full voice. Very beautiful it was too. And then from the CD we dug out last week, Frank Sinatra and Friends. And you heard yourself him introducing the friend in question this week in a wonderful sort of 40s, 50s style. You're quite a gal. You're quite a gal, indeed. Quite a girl she was. And that was Some Enchanted Evening with Janet Blair. Quite a girl, according to Frank. But he's quite a man as well. Yes. That was the style, wasn't it? It also has this sort of wonderful innocence to it, and no one really cared. No one got uptight about sort of things in the same way, seemingly. I don't know. I wasn't there. Maybe it was just they got uptight about other things. I expect it's the case, but, well, you know what I mean. Just has a lovely relaxed style back in the day, wasn't it, of the way people would talk, and it was much sort of simpler, I sort of feel. There we go, a nice little twofer. We'll keep that Frank one out, the Frankie and Friends, and do some more next week. Now, I promise you some Bean, or Hawk, I should say, Coleman Hawkins, with Friends as well, as he is in this one. Don't take your love from me. Bit of a longer one, so if you want to refill your glass or get another cup of Earl Grey, now's the time to do it. Lovely stuff from the album Nighthawk. Coleman Hawkins, a beautiful number there, and I hope you recognise it. Don't Take Your Love From Me. Coleman Hawkins, of course, on tenor. Eddie Lockjaw Davis, also on tenor. Tommy Flanagan at the piano. Ron Carter, still going, I think. Ron Carter, yeah, he is, on the bass. And Gus Johnson at the drums, recorded almost recently for this show, 1960. A mere 63 years ago. Yeah, it is recent. Don't dwell on it, is all I can say. Wonderful, wonderful sound and a great technique he had. He influenced so many sax players after him, the Hawk. And that, again, slightly breathy sound, really full-bodied sound he had on the tenor, sort of going back to the old style of playing to a degree, but also crossing that bridge into sort of heading towards bebop territory and on from there, so influencing everyone from sort of, the likes of Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, and I think any sax player worth their salt will quote Coleman Hawkins somewhere along the line. Now then, I wonder what I would do if I had a talking picture of you.
Talking picture of you, I would run it every time I felt blue. I would sit there in the gloom of my lonely little room, and applaud each time you whispered, I love you, on the screen the moment you came in view. We would talk the whole thing over, we two. I would give 10 shows a day and a midnight matinee if I had a talking picture of you.
Maybe that's what I'd do. Write a song about it. If I had a talking picture of you. Very fine. Billy Milton is the vocalist with Van Phillips. He's an interesting character too. Alexander Van Cleve Phillips. A wonderful name. An American reed player, composer and arranger, and played reeds with the Savoy Havana Band and the Savoy Ophians during the 20s and 30s with Carol Gibbons. I think arranged for Ambrose, for Jack Payne, for Henry Hall, and in the late 20s became a director of dance and theatre recordings at Columbia Records. Also had one eye to the pay packet and fair play, was a musicians' union executive. He directed the Four Bright Sparks, Van himself on clarinet and alto sax, Arthur Young piano, Len Phillips on guitar and Rudy Starita on percussion, and then travelled extensively a bit later on in life and produced a best-selling book on photography, The Traveller's Book of Colour Photography. A talented chap is all I can say. Just did one track with Al Bowley, Sometimes. The only track he ever recorded with Al Bowley. Flanders and Swan. I'm going to move on to At the Drop of Another Hat. And, well, you know what, I'm going to let them introduce this favourite of mine with a good preamble themselves.
Thank you very much. Good evening. May I introduce at the piano the very distinguished pianist, composer, and linguist, the Enid Blyton of English light music, Donald Swan.
Good evening.
I must be Michael Flanders, obviously. We write songs. I write the words, Swan here writes the music. We wrote these songs originally for other people to sing, which they did, but not nearly enough. And so a few years ago we began to sing and talk about them ourselves, and that is what we're here to do tonight. We've been wandering around all over the place since we saw you last. We went to America, New York. We spent 2 delightful years in America, entertaining the Americans, whose need, let's face it, is greater even than yours. And then, of course, when we're over there, we say that the other way around. We went to Canada, and we were in Switzerland, which was interesting too. They didn't understand a word, but they loved it. It was very interesting to see the homeland of so many great English actors. This year we've been touring England's depressed areas, and may I say what a pleasure it is to be here in London. My goodness, it is, isn't it?
I think so.
I'm very delighted to
concur
hear
with
it.
every word
I
you
must say, wandering around, he's trying to get his bit in, wandering around, things have come to a pretty underpass here in England while we've been away. It's small wonder to us that satire squats hoof in mouth under every bush. The purpose of satire, it has been rightly said, is to strip off the veneer of comforting illusion and cosy half-truth. And our job, as I see it, is to put it back again. Thank you. With this in mind, we offer you some more of our respectable songs for responsible people under the title of At the Drop of
Another
Hat. Well done, you got it there. Bang on, yes. Marvellously. Well, don't you say I never let you get a word in, will you? Word in edgeways like fish slice. Well, I think we're all assembled here, double bookings sorted out. So let's start with the first song. This is a sort of test piece. It doesn't count, as usual. Swan has moved since we saw him last. As some of you will know, he used to live in Prince of Wales Drive, Battersea. But since he became a great star, he thought this wasn't really very suitable. And he now lives in Albert Bridge Road, Battersea. He's getting on for Clapham Common. Not that it matters very much where you live south of the river now, because, as you know, under the new London plan, they're lumping all those areas together. Going to call them Brighton. I still live in what is, I believe, soon going to be known as Chelsington. Very pleasant area. And being at home has its problems. This song is a ballad of unending domestic upheaval. I'm sure you've all had something of the same experience. It's called The Gas Man Cometh.
'Twas on a Monday morning the gas man came to call. The gas tap wouldn't turn, I wasn't getting gas at all. He tore out all the skirting boards to try and find the main, and I had to call a carpenter to put them back again. Oh, it all makes work for the working man to do. 'Twas on the Tuesday morning the carpenter came round. He hammered and he chiselled and he said,
Look what I found. Your joists are full of dry rot, but I'll put them all to rights.
Then he nailed right through a cable and out went all the lights. Makes work for the working man to do.
'Twas on a Wednesday morning the electrician came. He called me Mr. Sanderson, which isn't quite my name. He couldn't reach the fuse box without standing on the bin,
And his foot went through a window, so I called the glazier in. Oh, it all makes work for the working man to do. 'Twas on the Thursday morning the glazier came along, with his blowtorch and his putty and his merry glazier song. He put another pane in, it took no time at all, but I had to get a painter in to come and paint the wall. Oh, it all makes work for the working man to do. 'Twas on a Friday morning the painter made a start. With undercoats
and overcoats
he painted every part, every nook and every cranny. But I found when he was gone, he painted over the gas tap and I couldn't turn it on. Oh, it's work for the working man to do. On Saturday and Sunday they do no work at all. So 'twas on a Monday morning that the gas man came to call.
Ah, yes. I think we've all been there at some stage or other. And I think it holds as true now as it did then, with the possible exception of the idea of getting any working men to turn up on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday when they said they're going to is almost impossible. If it would be a case of, it would be more like the gas man cometh over a period of 11 months these days. I think if the gas man came on Monday and painted over, then the painter, you might be lucky to get sort of, I don't know, a sort of 7 or 8 weeks later, and then after that, when the painter had finished, perhaps the electrician would come sort of 4 or 5 weeks after that, etc., etc. So it could actually, rather than being a week, it could be a year, I imagine, between the gas man coming to do the gas tap and then the gas man coming again to release the gas tap after the painter had painted it. Just putting it out there. Perhaps you have a different experience, but that's the way it normally seems to go. Flanders and Swan at the drop of another hat at the Theatre Royal, and like I said, they've toured widely, as Michael Flanders mentioned there, and you can't quite imagine them in America. It seems such a British type of humour, and the Americans do tend to have a very separate sort of humour, don't they? And I wondered whether they'd actually get it or not, but who knows? Either way, very, very witty, and the music is splendid as well. Must dig out that Donald Swan jazz album at some stage. Remember that? We featured that, a year or two back. Brilliant pianist. That more or less rounds it up for another Friday evening. Don't forget, Saturday evening, jumping in with Brother Chris, the best in modern and contemporary jazz. I know it's very different, but if you're in, give it a spin. You won't like everything, but you might like something. Who knows? You might get a whole new taste for modern jazz. Go on, I dare you. Even if you don't, we'll be back same time, same place next week. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you then. Cheerio.